Hello, seminar presentation is actually a skill. It is a skill anybody can acquire. Even you can acquire that skill. And that is why I'm presenting this seminar to you. All right. And I want to encourage you to follow the series, the slides here, and you will learn how to prepare because there are two things. The key thing is to prepare a very good slide for presentation, and another thing is to be able to exhibit that skills you need in presentation. So in this particular video, we'll be looking at how to prepare a good PowerPoint or slides for your presentation. And that reminds me of the story of a young man. He usually drives a driver. He happens to be a driver, and so he takes a professor often to occasions where the professor would do a very professional presentation, and then they will pay him for presenting such seminar. And so this young man began to envy the professor in a way, not too bad. He actually wished he could be the one presenting. So one day he opened up to the professor and said, "Sir, do you know I'm the one doing the greater part of this job? And then, because I'll wash the car, I'll drive you long distance. You could be sleeping, you could be reading somewhere at the back. And then when it's time for presentation, you spend like 30 minutes, 40 minutes. After presenting, they pay you fat envelope. And at the end of the day, I collect my small change." Prof said, "Well, we can actually strike a deal here." And what is the deal? My next presentation, the audience don't know me so much in person. I can help you prepare the slide in a very professional way. You come to the house and do rehearsal on how to present. Then that day, I will be the driver, you will be the professor. And the young man was like so excited. I said, "Prof, I'm willing to do it." And so that day, the professor wore a t-shirt and gave the young man a clothes, one of his popular wears. Many of his pictures on flyers and all of that, that's the clothes he used to wear. So he gave it to the young man, and the young man dressed like a professor. On the eventful day, when the professor was invited, the guy impersonating as the professor stepped to the podium. And then when he opened the slide, it was quite impressive. Everybody knew there was a signature of the professor on that slide. But then he did a very good presentation, which we'll talk about in the next video. He did a very good presentation until he got to a point where it was question time. Somebody asked a very technical question that only the person who wrote that paper can answer. And so while the question was coming, the guy was pacing around on the stage, thinking of what to do. Suddenly, an idea came. He told them, "Well, thank you very much for this very important question. However, I think this question is quite simple, that my driver behind there can actually answer this question." And who happens to be the driver? I'm sure you know, the professor. And that was how he carried the day. Sincerely, I do not know whether it happened, but the point I'm trying to make is that your presentation in terms of how you prepare your slide is important. Follow the next slide and you will see how to prepare a good slide for presentation that will give you all the credit you desire in your presentation. Thank you. So friend, you're welcome to this session, and exactly what I want to do is to show you how to create impressive thesis defense presentation. All right, this may be a bit different from when you are designing a presentation for marketing a product, or presenting for skill acquisition, or presenting to create awareness on a particular thing. For thesis is official, and you're expected to do an official presentation. And so what you need to do is first to start with your introduction. I'll just show you basically what to cover in a typical thesis presentation, but I encourage my students to make sure you find out what the institution or the department you are presenting for requires of you, and you stick to that expectation. All right, so here are a few points you need to know about designing a research paper PowerPoint presentation. One, make sure you focus on the main ideas, and then your critical findings. So you see what looks like ice cream cup here. The main idea is there. All right, then you'll find supporting details for those main ideas, and some of those supporting details must come with minimal text. Do not put a lot of words. If charts can help you illustrate that, that's better. Then there could be another additional supporting detail. There could be additional supporting details, but do not make it put a lot of words. It's PowerPoint. So you put few words. Ensure your slides are professional and very, very easy to understand. The slide you are going to present is different from your own slide as a presenter. I will explain that towards the end of this particular presentation. And then avoid excessive details. Those details are what you are expected to communicate, and that makes presentation interesting. So what are you expected to cover in your presentation? For Thesis, this is basic structure. So it now depends on what stage of your program. If you are doing a proposal of your thesis, of course you wouldn't have got a result at that point or discussion to present. So you present what is expected of you. So here we have the title page, the introduction, the research question or hypothesis, the literature review, the methods you have used. You state it clear. For most proposal, it ends at the stage of methodology. All right, but for subsequent ones, you now include your result and then discussion of the result, conclusion and recommendation. All right, these are things expected of you. Now when it comes to the title page, of course, we do not expect your title page to be more than one slide. And typically, you expected to include the title of the work clearly stated. And then your name will be there. Your institution of affiliation supposed also to be there. You have a supervisor. It may be required of you to state your supervisor and then the date of the presentation. Okay, the date is important because in case somebody sees that your work somewhere, want to reference it as something that was presented, the person will be citing that very date. The second thing expected of your slide is the introduction. Be as brief as possible. Introduce your topic and the research concern. Pick up the topic. You have already shown on the topic in your chapter, in your title slide. Then here in the introduction, it's just like newspaper headings. You put up a headline, a statement that look catchy, a statement that will make those that your audience will want to sit up and look at you and say, "How is it true?" Okay, so when they look at you, then you now begin to explain why you made that statement. Okay, why you made that statement, and your first impression matters. At the point of introduction, you expected to show ownership of the work. If you don't show ownership of the work, you lose your audience. So you make that first impression by introducing a catchy statement, then support that catchy statement with few arguments that makes a room, makes room for your own presentation to come in, to show that your work is relevant. All right, and then the next thing you have to do is to present your research question. In that, your introductory aspect is where you create room, you create a niche, you show the space, you show why your work is relevant. Okay, once you have been able to show why your work is relevant, it naturally generates question in the mind of the audience, and then you show them that question in the next slide. The question, your research question, is clearly stated. All right, and then in some cases you may need another slide to show the hypothesis, but if the questions are not too large, you may keep it within the same slide. So we expect not more than 2 slides here. All right, the next thing you expected to do is your literature review. In the literature, you demonstrate your understanding of the topic in terms of theories that are related to the topic, and then other empirical or other literature associated to the topic. All right, you present it in a way that shows that you understand the argument here, and then you try to show the gap in knowledge. So you present your theory, you present the empirical literature you've done, if it's an empirical study, by the way. But if it's something that has to do with theoretical study or review of literature like those in humanities, you present the arguments, different authors' argument, and then you create niche, you create a space to show that space has not been filled, and that is what your work is trying to fill. All right, you show it just the basic things what I expected of you, and then after that you expected to illustrate, show your method. Which approach are you using to address your research question? Which approach are you using to address your hypothesis? All right, so you clearly state it. If you collected data, you show the method you used in collecting your data. All right, So one of the most important things here is the fact that your methodology should address about 3 concerns. What is the method you are using? Why are you using, and how are you going to use that method, and why are you using it? You can also twist it the other way. What is the method you are using? Why are you using this method? You justify it. Then how are you going to use it? You also justify that. So that is what basically this slide is expected to address. So we don't expect more than 3 slides here. All right, you make it, you don't put a lot of weight on it. Keep it as plain as possible. And then the research, the result slide, you introduce your findings. Of course, when you introduce your findings, you introduce it relatively to research questions. So you clearly show the research questions you asked. You ask 2 questions or 3, as the case may be, or 4. And then what are the findings on each of these research questions? Or you want to show up your hypothesis. How were they tested, and what did you find when you tested those hypotheses, for those testing hypotheses? All right. And then you select the most impactful data, the highlight. What should be the takeaway from here? You present it also. So we expect between 2 to 4 slides here, but don't put a lot of weight on them. Make them as clear as possible. If you may want to use a table and show the table, and then begin to explain the table in subsequent slides. All right. And then you now enter the clear discussion. Discussion helps your audience make sense from your result. Your result may be very technical for some people to understand, but you try to make sense from it. And then you may want to discuss what you found out in relative to trends, relative to pattern, significant findings you are able to see. And then you may wish to relate it to theories you reviewed, or different previous research paper you also reviewed. So this is what you found out from your own analysis. This is what looks like your findings or your conclusion from this work. And is it in agreement with previous work? You can show it. You may even cite authors that it agrees with their own findings, and those it doesn't agree with their own findings, to substantiate your own finding, to give your own finding a space in the body of research. All right. And then you now come to the last stage, which is the conclusion part. The conclusion part is very simple. You keep it as simple as possible. You summarize your key findings. Usually 1 or 2 statements you want your audience to take away from your presentation. This is what we have decided to study. This is what we found. Therefore, this is the conclusion in this matter. So that those leaving the hall, if they forget all your grammar, all that you have said in the course of the presentation, they will go away with a message. It could be a discussion for people to start engaging for further research. All right. And that is why you will now end with a recommendation based on this, your clear conclusion. You are recommending some actions to be taken by whoever is the action owners, and you state it clearly. All right. And when you do that, you have done a very wonderful presentation. My closing remarks to you here is that there are some do's and don'ts, but I just not want to highlight 4 of them. 3 don'ts and 1 do. All right. The first don'ts is that don't make full sentence in your slide. Don't get used to making full sentence. If you must use full sentence, it should be scarce. Bullet points, like key points, so that you will be the one explaining to your audience what those bullet points are, and then they will give audience to you. They will give you attention. Do not use distractive patterns or colors, and try to bring a lot of charts that are difficult to understand. Okay, so don't use charts or graphs that are complicated. Whatever picture you are using or color should be something simple. Don't use a color that will make people try to read the character, the words in your slide. Make it as plain as possible. If the background is black, you use something that will contrast with that color, so that your character will come out clear. And then for me, the do is that anytime or next time you have opportunity to do a presentation, prepare 2 slides, 2 PowerPoint files. The first one is a comprehensive file of exactly what you want to tell your audience. When you have prepared that comprehensive file of what you want to tell your audience, I will show you example now. Then scan out, remove a lot of details from it. So you keep the details to yourself and now show them bullet points. All right, I call it the presenter slide and the audience slide. The audience slide is what I want my audience to see, but for my presentation in the hall, I will prepare a detailed version which I will use to do my rehearsal and prepare, so that those things I'm going to say are just there with me, but then I'll show you the key points. Those key points will help me remember what to say at each time. All right, that is why I want to show you this quickly. Now, okay, look at this slide. This slide is the author slide. This is what the author wants to present, and this is what the author is using to rehearse or prepare his presentation. Okay, now look at his introduction. You see, this is worded. Now let me show you what the author submitted for presentation. This is what the author had submitted for presentation. Look at this introduction. How do you compare this introduction? Here is a full sentence, but it's a simple, straightforward statement. But the point that we substantiate it is what he presented here. All right. So the audience are not seeing this point. This is the presenter's point, which he will use to substantiate this earlier statement he has made here. Okay. Now look at the next point. He's showing his audience in his next slide that has to do with why they study this. But this particular point we are seeing here is what he narrowed down and skinned it to this point: availability of financial institution or services and all of that, inconclusive. So this is basically what the audience will be looking at, whereas this point here is what he will be telling the audience. And so they will be listening to him while he or she explains these points, whereas what they are seeing is quite scanty. All right, maybe I will just show you the last one and then we will stop here. Okay, this is what he wants the audience to see in terms of the theories he reviewed. The audience will be looking at this particular slide as theories reviewed, but what the person will be presenting is this particular thing. This is the statement he will be telling the audience. He'll be discussing this point while the audience are looking at these points that are in bold letter here. And so if you take that method, it makes your presentation a very fantastic and professional one. All right, and that is where I'm going to end this discussion with you, and I want to wish you the very, very best in your next presentation. Next time you have a presentation to make, that's the point I need you to take away from here. Prepare 2 PowerPoint files. One is for you, the presenter, where you have all the details. When you are prepared that one, go through it and remove all the details and leave only the skeleton, only the framework, which you are going to submit and present to the audience. When they are seeing that framework or the skeleton, you are adding flesh to it. It makes you a very wonderful and powerful presenter. Thank you for joining in this discussion. Wishing you the very, very best in their next presentation. You'll come up as a star. God bless you. Cheers.